Spanish flu. The 1918-1920 flu pandemic, also known as the Great Influenza Epidemic or by the common misnomer Spanish flu, was an exceptionally deadly global influenza pandemic caused by the H1N1 influenza, a virus. The earliest documented case was March 1918 in the state of Kansas in the United States, with further cases recorded in France, Germany, and the United Kingdom in April. 2 years later, nearly a third of the global population, or an estimated 500 million people, had been infected in 4 successive waves. Estimates of deaths range from 17 million to 50 million, and possibly as high as 100 million, making it one of the deadliest pandemics in history. The pandemic broke out near the end of World War I, when wartime censors in the belligerent countries suppressed bad news to maintain morale. But newspapers freely reported the outbreak in neutral Spain, creating a false impression of Spain as the epicenter and leading to the Spanish flu misnomer. Plague of Justinian. The Plague of Justinian or Justinianic Plague, AD 541-549, was an epidemic that afflicted the entire Mediterranean basin, Europe, and the Near East, severely affecting the Sasanian Empire and the Byzantine Empire, especially Constantinople. The plague is named for the Byzantine Emperor Justinian I, who, according to his court historian Procopius, contracted the disease and recovered in 542, at the height of the epidemic, which killed about a fifth of the population in the imperial capital. The contagion arrived in Roman Egypt in 541, spread around the Mediterranean Sea until 544, and persisted in northern Europe and the Arabian Peninsula until 549. By 543, the plague had spread to every corner of the empire. As the first episode of the first plague pandemic, it had profound economic, social, and political effects across Europe and the Near East, and cultural and religious impact on Eastern Roman society. In 2013, researchers confirmed earlier speculation that the cause of the plague of Justinian was Yersinia pestis, the same bacterium responsible for the Black Death, 1346-1353. Ancient and modern Yersinia pestis strains are closely related to the ancestor of the Justinian plague strain that has been found in the Tian Shan, a system of mountain ranges on the borders of Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, and China, suggesting that the Justinian plague originated in or near that region. HIV/AIDS pandemic. The global epidemic of HIV/AIDS, human immunodeficiency virus infection and acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, began in 1981 and is an ongoing worldwide public health issue. According to the World Health Organization, by 2023, HIV/AIDS had killed approximately 40.4 million people, and approximately 39 million people were infected with HIV globally. Of these, 29.8 million people, 75%, are receiving antiretroviral treatment. There were about 630,000 deaths from HIV/AIDS in 2022. The 2015 Global Burden of Disease Study estimated that the global incidence of HIV infection peaked in 1997 at 3.3 million per year. Global incidence fell rapidly from 1997 to 2005 to about 2.6 million per year. Incidence of HIV has continued to fall, decreasing by 23% from 2010 to 2020, with progress dominated by decreases in Eastern Africa and Southern Africa. As of 2020, there are approximately 1.5 million new infections of HIV per year globally. Black Death. The Black Death was a bubonic plague pandemic occurring in Europe from 1346 to 1353. One of the most fatal pandemics in human history, as many as 50 million people perished, perhaps 50% of Europe's 14th century population. Bubonic plague is caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis and spread by fleas. One of the most significant events in European history, the Black Death had far-reaching population, economic, and cultural impacts. The origin of the Black Death is disputed. Genetic analysis points to the evolution of Yersinia pestis in the Tian Shan Mountains on the border between Kyrgyzstan and China 2,600 years ago. The Black Death was the second great natural disaster to strike Europe during the late Middle Ages and is estimated to have killed 30% to 60% of the European population. COVID-19 pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic, also known as the coronavirus pandemic, is a global pandemic of coronavirus disease 2019 caused by severe acute respiratory syndrome, coronavirus 2. The novel virus was first identified in an outbreak in the Chinese city of Wuhan in December 2019 and spread to other areas of Asia and then worldwide in early 2020. The World Health Organization, WHO, declared the outbreak a public health emergency of international concern, PAIC, on the 30th of January 2020 and assessed the outbreak had become a pandemic on the 11th of March 2020. The WHO ended the PAC on the 5th of May 2023. As of the 21st of March 2024, the pandemic has caused 7,037,007 confirmed deaths, ranking it 5th in the list of the deadliest epidemics and pandemics in history. COVID-19 symptoms range from asymptomatic to deadly, but most commonly include fever, sore throat, nocturnal cough, and fatigue. Transmission of the virus is often through airborne particles. Third plague pandemic. The third plague pandemic was a major bubonic plague pandemic that began in Yunnan, China in 1855. This episode of bubonic plague spread to all inhabited continents and ultimately led to more than 12 million deaths in India and China, and perhaps over 15 million worldwide. And at least 10 million Indians were killed in British Raj India alone, making it one of the deadliest pandemics in history. According to the World Health Organization, the pandemic was considered active until 1960, when worldwide casualties dropped to 200 per year. Plague deaths have continued at a lower level for every year since. Coca-Lisley epidemics. The Coca-Lisley epidemic, or the Great Pestilence, was an outbreak of a mysterious illness characterized by high fevers and bleeding, which caused 15 million deaths in New Spain during the 16th century. The Aztec people called it Coca-Lisley Nahuatl for pestilence. It ravaged the Mexican highlands in epidemic proportions, resulting in the demographic collapse of some indigenous populations. Based on the death toll, this outbreak is often referred to as the worst epidemic in the history of Mexico. Subsequent outbreaks continued to baffle both Spanish and native doctors, with little consensus among modern researchers on the pathogenesis. However, recent bacterial genomic studies have suggested that Salmonella, specifically a serotype of Salmonella enterica known as paratyphi C, was at least partially responsible for this initial outbreak. Others believe Coca-Lisley was caused by an indigenous viral hemorrhagic fever, perhaps exacerbated by the worst droughts to affect that region in 500 years, and poor living conditions for indigenous peoples of Mexico following the Spanish conquest. Antonine Plague. The Antonine Plague of AD 165 to 180, also known as the Plague of Galen, after Galen, the Greek physician who described it, was a prolonged and destructive epidemic, which impacted the Roman Empire. It was possibly contracted and spread by soldiers who were returning from campaign in the Near East. Scholars generally believe the plague was smallpox, although measles has also been suggested, and recent genetic evidence strongly suggests that smallpox only arose much later. In AD 169, the plague may have claimed the life of the Roman Emperor Lucius Verus, who was co-regnant with Marcus Aurelius. These two emperors had risen to the throne by virtue of being adopted by the previous emperor, Antoninus Pius, and as a result, their family name, Antoninus, has become associated with the pandemic.